Premier Pillai, good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you again as well.
Listen, I want to begin with Arctic security because, from our NATO allies, we know that is very much a priority for Canada. They want our country, our military, to focus on the Arctic. And you now have the government rolling out an Arctic policy. What do you make of this renewed focus on Canada's north?
Oh, well, first of all, we're very happy to see the focus at this particular time. I mean, we knew it was long overdue. You've heard that from other premiers across the north, and it's something that we've been echoing from the Yukon. It's been a real focus of our work over the last number of years, and seeing Canada make that commitment to the north, to the Arctic, is incredibly important, not just for Canadians, but for our place in the world.
Our place in the world. And when you listen to our allies, they kind of both figuratively and literally want Canada to focus on the north because of the changing environment. Can you talk about that with us as to how you see things changing and how that creates priorities that Canada needs to address?
Yeah, well, of course, with climate change comes the reduction of ice in the Arctic. We know that that's going to lead to the potential of more traffic, international traffic within our northern borders. A lot of Canadians might not know, but the Yukon has a northern coastline on the Beaufort Sea, as well as the second longest border in Canada with Alaska on the U.S. side. But it's something that we've been very concerned about for a number of years, making sure that Canada invests and focuses on how we're going to handle the changes in the Arctic, and really what we're seeing from the posture of certain countries on the north part of the Pacific. So we're doing a lot of things at home. We put together an advisory council on security. They've just come out with their first report. So we've brought together some very strong academics and former leaders in the Canadian Armed Forces. And they've focused on a number of points of advice for us, and we've shared that with Canada. And then last week we made another very significant announcement, which is the start of the Canadian Institute for Arctic Security. And so Canada has partnered with us, and now we're bringing together many agencies, as well as the Canadian Armed Forces and academic minds to think about what we need to do and how can we, with a northern voice, help direct some of that work. And as well, we've had a very exciting week. We also signed an agreement with the Canadian Armed Forces for a naval reserve based in Whitehorse, but really looking at small craft, but also just having a military presence in the Yukon, which was, again, long overdue. So we see Canada really starting to lean in. But we have a tremendous amount of work to do. Yeah.
Let me break that up a little bit. And I want to first begin with this Security Institute, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
Because in terms of the security challenges that you see evolving, you kind of mentioned it in quick passing, but dig into that for us. Yeah. When you see the evolving security challenges, what are you, at this point, ahead of the work of this institute, what are you seeing as the challenges that need to be addressed?
I think there's probably three different areas that I would, have our team focus on, and the things that I would think about. First of all, when it comes to our border with Alaska, I want to say that is not a major concern, but we're going to see things change on the southern U.S. border. We're going to see this new administration in the U.S. Really shake things up. So we're going to continue to have a strong conversation with Canadian Border Services, and we're going to be vigilant on our own border. Again, not a great concern right now, but something we're going to keep our eye on.
So a concern of migration.
Yeah, just making sure that we have a sense of how things could change in North America. The second would be, as we touched on, what do we see on our northern border? What are the other territories seeing? What is Canada seeing when it comes to movement of potential research vessels? Maybe we see other navies starting to move into places that they haven't been before. And that's something that, that's on our coastline. Our First Nation leaders and our First Nation communities that are on the land see changes and things such as this that can happen. And we want to make sure that Canada is there protecting our borders, but also making sure that we're vigilant, again, watching what's happening in those changes.
And you're talking about Russian ships, Chinese ships?
Yeah, both Russian and Chinese have, we've seen more activity off the coast of Alaska and moving higher into the Arctic. I think this is a change we're going to see over years, not over seasons or a season, but we have to be very aware of that. And the third is going to be foreign interference. And that's something that really comes into play when we're talking about everything from investment in critical minerals right through to what we see where people are gathering information throughout Canada, and I think that's going to be a focus of the Institute as well. And we'll see other agencies within our Canada have interest in helping with those conversations. So really sort of those three different areas right now, I think, are things that we want to keep a focus on.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned both the border with Alaska as well as the incoming Trump administration, of course, his return to the White House. And at this point, you've already been part of a First Minister's meeting talking about how to meet any challenges that might be coming from the United States regarding trade. Donald Trump, for example, talking about a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods going into the U.S. How harmful would that be for Yukon?
Well, I think at this point we have to figure out where the tariff would be applied. So, they haven't really disseminated that. If this is a 25% tariff that could be applied to the export of critical minerals, it could be extremely damaging to Yukon's economy and all economies in the country. So we have to figure out where the real focus of the tariffs will be. I think overall we know it's incredibly concerning. You've seen the response from provincial and territorial leaders. You've seen response from business sector, trade unions, federal officials. So we know that this is potentially very significant. Our focus is to make sure that we continue to nurture the relationships that we already have. So we have a great relationship with Alaska. We've done a lot of work with the governor of Alaska, who's a close ally of Donald Trump, Republican governor that I've built a strong relationship with. We share so many of the challenges being in the north, but also the benefits and opportunities and interests and values. So that's continued to be a strong working relationship. We worked with Alaska and the U.S. government to bring tens of millions of dollars into the Yukon for upgrades to infrastructure just in the last year. So we've seen the relationship bear fruit, and at the same time we're looking at things like the export of firefighters during their wildfire season. Any way we can continue to support each other. So we're going to continue to make sure that folks like Mike Dunleavy, the governor of Alaska, understands our concerns in the Yukon, but also Canadian concerns. And what you saw at the First Minister's meeting was really all the premiers coming together and saying to the federal government, please, we want to be at the table, we want to help. Almost all of us have strong relationships in the U.S. Many of our premiers have strong relationships with Republican governors and lawmakers, and we think a true Team Canada approach, which includes premiers at the table with our federal ministers, is something we must do if we're going to take on what could be a major challenge for us over the next number of months.
Mm-hmm. Quickly running out of time, but I have to ask you, because we were both at the Council of the Federation in Halifax over the summer, and there was a clear message from all the premiers that there was not enough communication from the Trudeau government with the provincial and territorial governments. Do you think that's about to change?
Yeah, I think it's about to change. It needs to change. And there's a commitment from the Prime Minister to sit down with the premiers before the inauguration, and I think we're going to be waiting to see that happen. I know we have our Council of the Federation meeting in about a week, a little over a week, and we might see federal representatives attending that meeting. I know that that's been sort of an overture that's been put out, and you're right. In the summertime in July, I think lots of Canadians were wondering why the premiers were standing up, maybe moving out of our lane into another lane and saying, we really have to understand that this could happen. And, I know that Doug, but Wab as well, Premier Canoe, many folks at the table said, had conversations in Washington. So, that was the hedge. And this is where we are now. There was the potential of it happening. It has happened. And so really now we're at the table saying, let's figure out about the 2% spend. We know it puts major pressure on the federal government. We understand that. Let's make sure that we spend this money appropriately. Let's spend it now so we get more value for the money than 10 to 15 years from now. But let's make sure it has a true impact to Canadians. And anywhere we can build dual-use infrastructure that can increase the quality of life for Canadians and our economy, that's a good place to put money.
Premier Pillai, always good to see you. Thank you for the time.
Yes, thank you so much.